old for video games?
You have failed.
The same way, I will destroy you. And my friend is truly dead.
Now this is pod racing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi. Or Balding Jedi, if you will. I am UrzaMaster. With me, as always, is Lord Uther and Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. Welcome, welcome. This week we will be discussing the bombshell 4th episode of Ahsoka, and I may still mispronounce it. This episode, I have to say, fellas, I just watched today. I was a little behind the times. I didn't catch it as it debuted, which thankfully probably prevented me from streaming interruptions. We've got a lot to unpack here. I mean, I don't even want to step on Jedi Master Psyllium Maas's toes, but suffice to say that this episode is yet another reason why we stand with SAG-AFTRA and the WGA, because it is a tremendous example of acting, writing, and the creative forces behind the scenes who deserve fair compensation and deserve to have their residuals for these streaming services. They put in tons and tons of effort to entertain millions and millions of people. And when the millions
and millions
of fans of whatever show it is get to stream it, maybe it's a fraction of a penny at a grab, but they deserve something, and certainly something to show for it. With that, and without any further delay, or me trying to fill my couple of minutes that I always try to fill at the beginning of the show, I'm very excited to get started, and I really don't want to spoil anything, so Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, please enlighten us.
Hello there. Thank you, Lord Uther. Thank you, UrzaMaster, and thanks to all of you watching at home. Episode 4 of Ahsoka, Fallen Jedi. Written, as always, with a solo writing credit to Dave Filoni, and directed by Peter Ramsey. Peter, who grew up in the Crenshaw district, studied painting in college, and that launched his career first as a storyboard artist, working on a plethora of pictures dating all the way back to the late 1980s. A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, Predator 2, Tank Girl, Independence Day,
Tank Girl,
Men in Black, and Fight Club, just to name a few. He went on to become an animation director, and he became the first African American who directed a major studio animated release with 2012 DreamWorks Animation's Rise of the Guardians, a film, in case you didn't catch it, in which Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and Jack Frost teamed up to save the world from holiday madness. So Rise of the Guardians. He then went on, Peter Ramsey, to co-direct the first installment of Sony's Spider-Man franchise, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, in 2018. That film was phenomenally successful, not just a great Spider-Man picture, but one of the best pictures of 2018. He went on to become the first African-American nominated for an Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, and that year, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. He got his Star Wars lightsaber ignition doing episode 21 of the past season's Mandalorian. In the 3rd season, he directed a slam-bang shoot-'em-up on Navarro called The Pirate, which you'll recall from Mandalorians there. So that was Peter, and he'll only be doing one episode this cycle. But he really brought the heat, if you will. This episode, from almost its opening frame to its shocking cliffhanger finale, was full of big reveals, well choreographed lightsaber fights, and lots of little surprises along the way that we'll be speaking of. The other major note that we need before we get into the nitty-gritty is we need to discuss conceptually where it is that Ahsoka ended up. It's one of the more controversial avenues of Star Wars, and it was Dave Filoni who first ushered it in while they were writing and directing the animated series Star Wars Rebels. I, of course, am referring to the world between worlds. So this was, again, in consultation with George Lucas and the like as they were working on these animated shows prior to the Disney relaunch of the live action and the streaming. This was an idea, a concept that the Force had a physical space in which certain Jedi, certain Force users could access. It's telling, it appeared in one episode in season 4 of Rebels. Ezra Bridger, whom we're questing to find in this series, along with Grand Admiral Thrawn. Ezra Bridger is the one who discovered and was ushered into the world between worlds on the planet Lothal, which is where Sabine and the Lothcats were hanging out at the beginning of the series. He found it in an abandoned Jedi temple, and he entered it, and again, fans either embraced it or pushed it aside. Now, it's not a multiverse, multi-timeline junction, so to speak. What it is, and at least as it's been expressed up to this point, there are a series of portals, gateways, fissures that will open up onto key events. You know, say Anakin and Obi-Wan dueling on Mustafar, or in the case of Rebels, Ahsoka meeting her former Jedi Master only as Darth Vader, in which they had a ferocious lightsaber duel in the animated series. So there are key moments throughout this singular timeline that are accessible. Now, the right Force user could potentially enter one of these gateways or dimensions and change events. I mean, if they were to take it to the whole thing. Ezra Bridger wanted to save one of his friends from being destroyed and blown up, but by doing that, he was warned that he could alter events irreparably, and in fact, he himself might perish. So it'll be fascinating to see in the live action, you know, what rules Filoni will sort of game out here for the viewer. It's possible that this is where Force ghosts manifest, in the sense that this gives them the ability to reach into the land of the living and communicate with them. It should also be telling that not all Force users can gain access. The crux of the animated World Between Worlds episode was that Palpatine wanted to get inside, wanted to corrupt Ezra Bridger to let him through the gate, and Ezra wouldn't. So Palpatine, despite being Darth Sidious and having enormous Sith powers and reach, was not able on his own to find a way in. Now, our heroine Ahsoka has found herself in by a most perilous fashion. We don't know if she's alive. We don't know if she's dead. Probably a combination of the both. Baylan Skoll gave her a good swift kick off of a cliff, and when she awakened, she found herself back in this familiar setting, at least to, again, the viewers of Rebels said, oh, it's the world between worlds. So is she hovering, you know, near death, hanging from a cliff? Is she, you know, beneath the seas of Cetos, struggling to get to the surface? All of these questions, I'm sure, will be answered in a pivotal episode 5. But what's important is that her consciousness has found itself there, and she now has seen her former master as she remembers him, as she last saw him before she left the Jedi Order, before he became Darth Vader and turned away. So the title Fallen Jedi has a lot of fun little things to it. Not only does she fall off a cliff, but Anakin himself is the ultimate embodiment of fallen Jedi there. And the two really great, we've been calling them Dark Jedi, I guess, or Gray Jedi, or however you wanted to put it. Baylan Skoll and Shin Hati. They both, in this episode, they convey genuine menace. And I think, it's a tragedy that we lost actor Ray Stevenson, who again had entertained us as the Punisher and the HBO series Rome and other things. But what a formidable, just physical presence he presents in this show, when he takes on Sabine and Ahsoka separately and in unison. My companion my partner who was watching the show with me said, he's like late season Russell Crowe. And she's not wrong, with the beard and the body and so forth. But I would take Ray Stevenson in 3 against a current Russell Crowe right now, based on what I've been seeing. He was just, and his delivery, his dialogue is delivered, very softly. You don't hear him raging and overdoing it and pulling an Eric Bana in the Kelvin reboot of Star Trek. Like he's very quiet and sinister and purposeful, and because he knows he doesn't need to shout. There are people who feel they need to shout to get their point across, and that's how they lead, through intimidation and fear and all of that. And there are others that just know that they can say what needs to be said and manipulate their underlings and so forth into doing their bidding. And that leads us to the first big thing to talk about tonight is the Sabine betrayal, because it really opens up a fascinating what will they do from this moment forward. Anakin had a similar betrayal of his Jedi principles when he sacrificed it all for the love of Padme. He was willing to embrace Palpatine and Darth Sidious's tutelage in exchange for saving her life. Has formed an attachment. And it's clear that Sabine has that same attachment with Ezra, whether it is as a brother figure or even the show hinted at Ezra had a crush on her when he first met her. Whatever that bond is, she's unwilling to let go of it for the greater good, as Ahsoka counsels her early in the episode. And so she makes a choice none of us probably agree with in terms of, for the character, like, no, don't do that. But it makes for great drama, because now what do we do with Sabine? She's thrown in with the bad guys. She's allowed their evil plans to, proceed forward. How do you redeem that character, or how do you bring that character back on the ledger of good with that kind of betrayal? Because Anakin ultimately paid the price, became Darth Vader, and it was only through his son years later that he was finally able to break free of that yoke. I don't think we're going to do an exact one-on-one replica of that, but I'm curious how you guys feel about Sabine's choice, and as the character, like what doorways that may open in these next episodes.
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I think there's a pretty direct reference to Anakin. It's a very close mirror to his journey, and the show is called Ahsoka, not Sabine. So the metal test here is, how is Ahsoka going to react to the same thing Anakin did, knowing how she reacted the first time, knowing that Anakin is there to counsel her. The writing is on the wall. And actually, if I was going to point out one weakness of this show, really two, it's that it's kind of obvious that this is getting teed up this way. Like, you could tell from the jump that Sabine had a very un-Jedi connection, brother-like or love of her life-like, to, what's his name, Buzz? Or Ezra. So to Bridger, and you kind of saw this coming a mile away, especially like Ahsoka's. I was like, can I trust you? Are you going to betray me? She might as well be like, are you going to be an Anakin? Are you going to be of the opinion that the Jedi are evil? However, this show is written way better than episode 2 and 3. Far better than episode 1. My one gripe beyond that, just the predictability of it, is the extended exchanging of the orb, which took, again, my opinion, too long. You knew she was going to hand him the orb. Like, there was no agonizing over it. It didn't feel tense. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt too long. Just hand him the orb. She thinks Ahsoka's dead. She's going with her instinct, trying to figure out her next move. Now, what I will say is that, like many good two-parters, the next episode is probably going to play out her ultimate plan. Because I think, all things being parallel in the Star Wars universe, because they're recycling a lot of different stories, I think this harkens back to Luke Skywalker when he surrenders himself to the Empire. They're like, Luke, the hell are you doing? All your rebel friends are going to get totally effed. Why are you leaving Yoda? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Because there's a greater plan at work. There is a greater force at work. And really, honestly, it's more of the hidden cerebral plan that Sabine probably has. Like, okay, now I'm in the hands of the enemy, but I'm very close, so I can be there to, try and stop the eventuality. Okay, I think there's a loose plan there. Again, it's kind of predictable, but also we have the wild card of Ahsoka, who is now in the world between worlds, which does make that ever more intriguing than the I hate you, I have the high ground. I will say, though, the one thing I found really cool about Hayden Christensen being in the end of this episode is he looks good, honestly, as a Vader, a non-Vader Anakin Skywalker. And with what he did on Obi-Wan, I feel so much better about his performance in episodes 2 and 3. I really feel like this character is intriguing again. Not to get off the Ahsoka show and go on a tangent, but come along with me on this ride, why don't you? I would love to see the R-rated Vader show that Lord Uther salivates over, and I really think Hayden Christensen could pull it off. I really think he could be, the burnt cheese skin having, I take my helmet off every day to sort of reflect on how I've messed my life up, but then I'm going to go commit genocide kind of villain. I think that would be really cool.
So a post-episode 3, pre-episode 4 Vader, somewhere in the timeline there where he's just eradicating resistance. Okay.
Yep.
Which should be fueled by his eternal pain of possibly contributing to the loss of Padme.
Right.
I think if you add that piece in, it makes his hatred, which was the reason for doing that, right? Justifies the wrong reason, but acceptable or maybe even understandable.
Sure.
That he kind of, flipped out in a sense, and that feeds his hate, and that's what makes him powerful too, right? He's supposed to be angry and hateful and vengeful. So I think that would bring that about. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to throw that in there.
That's great.
There, Urza.
Oh, I was just going to turn it over to you at that point.
Oh, well, wonderful transition piece then, without a doubt. Yeah, so I have a few thoughts. I would love to see a Thrawn Balin almost pairing as a series at some point, or have them become the bad guys. Now, unfortunately, we know that's probably not going to happen because the poor actor is no longer with us. Spoiler alert.
He's a Force ghost.
Yeah, so I mean, that's probably not going to wind up happening. But I think in terms of being a new great bad guy, I really feel like he was kind of it. I mean, I think they could have done something with him a little bit beyond this. There's a lot of talk out there about this Between Worlds place possibly retconning the sequels trilogy, which I know we kind of had this discussion before, but there's a lot of talk out there that this might be a gateway to possibly do that. I still don't see that happening. I don't think Disney would let that happen. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that possibility, especially if you're able to kind of jump into an event at any point.
I will say this without being spoilery for you two, and hopefully not for our viewers. I have it on pretty good authority that, again, next week's episode is written and directed by Dave Filoni, which would be the first time since the first episode that happened in this cycle. So I have heard just this evening that this episode, episode 5, may be screened in theaters this upcoming week, like a Fathom Events, one-time event. It's going to blow the lid off a lot of things. You can always tell when the show's creators get involved and so forth. They're like, okay, we should expect something. This next episode, which may take place solely within the world between worlds. I'm not sure if they're going to cut outside of it and show us what's going on. I would hope they would show us what Sabine and Elspeth and Balin and all them are up to. But it may do primarily with this world, not only setting the ground rules for people who aren't familiar with its original animated origins, but again, we won't know until it unspools next Tuesday. Episode 3 and the very sequence that UrzaMaster was mocking just a few moments ago, that entire Jedi duel is allegedly at stake between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin on Mustafar, and whether or not there's interference in that or an adjustment in how that happened, and what ultimately came of that. That's what the scuttlebutt that I'm hearing that we're steering towards, that this will be it will have ramifications. So we will have to wait and see if that is, just internet chatter. Internet chatter, you will remember, thought that there would be a grand reveal of who Marek the Inquisitor was in this show. It was going to be several different characters, right down to the video game, the Force Unleashed, all of this. And I think Filoni had a nice laugh with all of us in a terrific samurai-like moment where Ahsoka sliced him in two and an eruption of green smoke came out of his body.
That did surprise me.
Yes.
I did not think that was coming.
I thought that, what a badass move that was, fight-wise after the duel. But then, like with everyone in the internet crumpling up pieces of paper and throwing, oh, geez, it wasn't Ezra? Are you kidding? So I thought that was funny. I mean, we don't have the luxury of being able to game it out like they already have. Obviously, we're throwing darts and hoping that they stick. And Ursa's very good at that. But I've got to say, I'm on the edge of my seat as to what this does. Any footage we've seen of this show from the trailers or the internet has been up until this moment. There's nothing past what we've seen now. So we are flying in the dark, proverbially and literally, in the sense that we have no idea what the next 4 are coming.
I'm going to tell you this. It gives me hope then. Because, and this was a question I was going to ask the two of you, so I guess I'll ask it now because it aligns with it.
Does it give you a new hope?
You are on fire.
Star Wars.
And I love it. I'm trying to figure out, this is probably going to surprise both of you, and it's even surprising myself a little bit that I'm going to say this because I have enjoyed the show. I'm trying to figure out if the internet hate that I've been coming across is justified. Because to Urza's point, I feel like we're rehashing stories over and over again. Now that sounds weird because as all of our millions
and millions
of fans know, I'm all about proper cheese. I mean, if the cheese is there and it's proper, it's just enough to invoke some of that nostalgia, I'm all good. But things can be too cheesy. And that's tough for me to say because, like I said, I literally love cheese and figuratively love it as well. So that's what's making me that was making me nervous. That are we going to rehash this? Sabine is really, this is a plot for her to actually get to Ezra and then somehow save him and all that kind of stuff. So if what you're telling me, Master Maas, is accurate, I'm actually excited and looking forward to that episode next week, because like I said, I'm a little worried here we're going to get stuck in the sloop, or they're going to do something, and I can't believe I'm saying this either, because I can't stand the sequel trilogy, to make that another branch, like a Kelvin timeline. I'm so worried that they're going to do that. I don't want to see that anymore. I don't want to see it in a Marvel movie anymore. I don't want to see it in a Star Trek movie. I don't want to see timelines, even though The Flash was fantastic. I don't want to see it. I'm done with it. Unless you're going to turn it into something where they're one-shots, right? Which I told you guys I would love to see, like a one-shot of Clooney again as Batman. But it's got to be something totally separate that's not involved in the universe. Because even though you have the Kelvin... I'm sorry we're talking Star Trek here, but too bad. Because even though you have the Kelvin timeline, there were 3 movies, and it messed with me so much, I don't even want it to be a branch from the original series. Like, just trash it. Get rid of it. It never happened. And I don't want that to happen to my Star Wars. Can you hear the passion in my voice? Can you? I don't want it.
So,
all right, I'm done.
So like I said, it's going to really play out as to how they wanted to lay this out for the live action viewers, the people who are new to the party or so forth. In how it is understood up until now, until next Tuesday, like I said, it's not that there's like, oh, look, there's infinite number of possibilities in which this happened and that happened. It's all of the events along this singular back and forth. Ezra wanted to interrupt those flows and was counseled by Ahsoka not to, and ultimately made the right decision and so forth. So I don't know how much interaction we're talking about, whether that would, spin things off and then suddenly, Padme never existed. I don't know what they're going to go for. I think the impulse is that they do want to go big and they do want to, quote, blow some minds. But this ties back into what you're saying about sort of the originality or the respinning. Dave Filoni, again, kind of came to a head and grew up at the knee of George Lucas in this. And Lucas has always been that these things are cyclical. Like, he was adamant that the same story that we told in the middle trilogy, whether you change the details and put it on Coruscant instead of Endor, or whether you put it on, in the sequel trilogy, Hosnian Prime instead of Coruscant. History echoes and repeats in many different ways. And then so that's always been built into the Star Wars framing. And you can't really get away from that. And Filoni, like I said, is his secret sauce and his strength is that he really wrapped his arms around what George Lucas had always intended, that this show is meant to grow generationally. It's meant to be passed on from fathers to sons to grandsons and so on, but in a way that it doesn't just appeal, and I guess this brings up sort of where we are as fans. It isn't just supposed to appeal to the 46-year-olds who were first-gen Star Wars fans when it was in theaters since 1977. It has to appeal to the 5-year-olds and the 8-year-olds who are watching Rebels and the animated Tales of the Jedi and Young Jedi Adventures. And you can't lose sight, as much as we like the Andors and let's get an R-rated Darth Vader, and I would sign up for that in a second. We have to remember that ultimately it's not family entertainment, but it's an entertainment that's supposed to sort of be embraced by, I was 4 years old when I first saw it, and forever changed my life, and I'm unabashed about it. And that's why I'm much more forgiving of its flaws. I'm much more willing to look past some of the obvious things that people that don't have that kind of investment in it could, and even ones that are invested that have that. It's not that I am blinded to them. It's not that I don't think, Jake Lloyd might have been a little stiff or the dialogue's a little on the nose. I accept that, but I accept it like with a warm embrace and a hug, and just saying, you're my Star Wars, because of this world that they've created. So, I mean, I ask you, gentlemen, I mean, who should it be for, right? Should it be for Ursa's next in lines, or yours, Uther's? Should it be, for us who were there from the beginning, and damn it, we deserve, to see Vader, slicing off heads on pikes? I mean, it's such an interesting question as to, because the internet hate seems to come from like our generation, who says, Ewoks are dumb, and Gungans, really? And what's with the rolling droid? But then like I say, there were 8 and 10-year-olds during Phantom Menace that loved Jar Jar. They did. I mean, it's like, and Ahsoka, when she was introduced, she was considered annoying, this bratty 14-year-old, and then she grew up. I mean, and like the viewers. So it's interesting as to who Star Wars is supposed to be for. I mean, your children, both of you have families at varying ages and degrees. Like, have they found the same love that we did at our various points? I mean, in terms of that, are there characters that they responded to that you guys thought, oh, that's kind of silly, but they're like, oh, I know, I love 3PO. Like, I'm curious if your families have done that, or if they're more into, Jurassic World, Transformers, Harry Potter. I mean, the stuff that's come since then.
My kids are definitely more, I think, original series kids than anything. Okay. My daughter loved Mandalorian.
Right.
Kids love Grogu. Right. It's a little cuddly baby that causes a little mischief. Adults, I think, loved Grogu because we know what he can become, or she. I don't even know for sure on that yet.
I think it's
we don't know what he can become down the line because we know of Yoda. So I think it appeals to us as well. So, and I think you're making great points about, yes, it should appeal to various generations so they can get involved in it. Now, my kids are having a rough time with Ahsoka. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe they don't know enough of the backstory with Rebels, though I didn't know it either.
Right.
But, so, are you is there concern from either of you that they use this between worlds, which if they're changing an event, again, I'm no genius, allegedly, but if they change an event, they're changing the time. I mean, they're changing the timeline to me, and I know I keep harping on this. I'm just going to harp on it one more time, and then I'll stop. It becomes too confusing. Loki, yes, I could follow it, but you're confusing the bejesus out of me, and you're throwing all these timelines in, and it's kind of like, I feel like Endgame set up this whole timeline thing for a lot of different movies and franchises, in a sense, kind of the way the prequels from Star Wars set up a lot of movies going backwards, right? Look at what they did with Star Trek. They went to Enterprise. They went backwards. We were begging them to go forward. Go forward again. Going backwards, filling in gaps. It didn't work, but that happened with a lot of franchises. So I just don't want to see him change the timeline.
Okay.
There's got to be more originality, and I'm going to give you one more piece. I promise I'll stop after this, Urza. Seeing Captain Teva, is that his name?
Carson Teva.
There was talk of them having their own series.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, but I would have liked to have seen that to, again, kind of get away from...
And do you know who was going to lead that series?
Yeah, Filoni. Was
Well,
he?
yeah, no, Filoni and Favreau,
Oh.
yes, but that's behind.
Oh,
the
I
scenes.
know who you're
But the lead character, the Rangers of the New Republic, it was to be called,
That's what it was. Yeah.
and it was that woman who was really buff, and then
Yeah,
says
and
some
said a
really
lot of bad
terrible
things.
things on the internet, and then so then that's where
Got
that
canceled.
Gina Carano?
yes,
Yeah. She
That's-
was
yeah.
she was supposed to lead that.
she was supposed to
But anyway.
lead the X-wing pilots and the A-wing pilot. Like that was her show, and then went. "Roop." So yes, so could they resurrect it? Sure, but they would need a compelling lead.
Right.
I think Carson.
Yeah, well, I just think I love it. I love his character. I love how he pops in all these different episodes. Like, that's the kind of stuff I like to see right now, too. So, I'm sorry, I'm going to let you talk in a second, I promise. I'm trying not to lean into the internet hate, and I'm also trying to figure out if the internet hate is just for the sake of hating and is not justified. I'm still trying to figure that out. So maybe next week's episode will help. Urza, it's your turn.
I don't know where to begin now. I think Star Wars should be for everybody.
Right.
I will say I think the originals are always going to be the best, even though they've been completely ruined by the digital updates. I will say that. I do think that the first update, when they made Jabba a worm, was cool. But beyond that, I don't like it. It's just distracting, you know. But, obviously, I love the idea of a generationally changing story. I think that's really a neat franchise idea. I like it. I like the intent. It helps bridge gaps between young and old, and I think there's not enough of that. Although I don't think you need to rehash the same stories to do that. I think that you could do what Star Trek is doing on Strange New Worlds, and yes, that's a prequel show, and yeah, some of the tropes are echoed, but it's very fresh. You get the trial episode. Yeah, they've done trials on every Star Trek series, sorry, but it still comes across as interesting, new, different. And if you go forward, you can still use all those tropes on an exploration show like we got on Next Generation, or maybe we'll get on Legacy. I'd love to see more Q stuff. John Delancey's not getting any younger. I'd love to see them explore that more. And for Star Wars, I'd love to see the same thing. Like, tell compelling stories. Like, you can introduce big bads. There's plenty of them in the books. Or just have them keep fighting different Sith or different, bad Force users who crop up, or, even if it broke down to, regional warlords who simply command a lot of power, have it be a Force user who isn't Luke Skywalker powerful, or, isn't... That's why I like The Mandalorian, because he's not all powerful. He gets his ass whooped a few times. But... I got to be frank too. Grogu almost kind of ruins that series. He makes it a little too cutesy. Although in season 2, I liked him quite a bit more. And I'm not saying he wasn't funny and wasn't great. I liked him, but if you think about it from the perspective of creating just an entertaining show, it makes it a little challenging. I think, but it does appeal to children. And it's going to get people who may not otherwise like Star Trek into Star Trek. I think about having strong female leads. This show does a fantastic job of it. That's going to bring in, more people who identify closer with the female lead. And I love to see it, and I think that's the real opportunity, is to start to branch into more diverse leads of a franchise. Be they Jedi, be they Sith, be they, rogues or rebels or warlords, whatever. I mean, you could tell a villain series, you can tell a good guy series. And you don't have to pigeonhole any one class of character into they're always the bad guy. You could tell a Sith story that's a compelling, not redemption arc, but a good Sith. A bad guy who has his agenda and it's evil, but part of that agenda just happens to play into saving a planet or curing a disease because they need something from that world. Like, their ultimate goal may be sinister. Like, the Darth Vader series could do something like that. You know, his ultimate goal to eradicate the Jedi is very sinister. But along that path, there could be things he does that really actually does benefit the vast majority of people. You know, that's one thing I think you forget about empires, and I am not going to defend tyrannical regimes, but there are those who benefit sort of accidentally from horrible otherwise situations. You know, I mean, there are plenty of people who flourished under the Empire who are no lovers of the Empire. They just happen to do well under the Empire. And without the Empire, maybe now they're getting plundered by space pirates. Maybe now they're getting assaulted from all these groups, or they're flooded with refugees, and the rebellion slash the New Republic can't do anything for them because they're still chasing their tail trying to figure out how to run a government. Those are compelling stories. They're fresh takes where it's like, you understand why somebody might sympathize with the Empire. So, in my mind, I would love to see stories like that. I think that's a great way to build new audiences. You don't have to tell these giant universe-altering stories every time. Now, I'd love to see canon stories, but if you're going to do a series, you could do a series just about these other groups. And yeah, they can kind of tie together like an Avengers at some crux or juncture. Grogu and Mandalorian could stop by. I really am not going to be surprised at all if in these final few episodes of Ahsoka we don't see Grogu and the Mandalorian, or Luke Skywalker and Grogu, or
I agree.
you know, XYZ, you name it. Or, you know, a young Ben Solo pushes Jason off of a cliff and Hera's like, ah, you bastard. Like, you know, I mean, there's so many things that could happen that I would not be surprised at all. But, you know.
Sitting here, as you guys are talking about it, the difference between what Strange New Worlds is doing and where we are right now in the Star Wars universe, it got me to thinking. Star Wars has always embraced, and we talked about this on an earlier episode, they've always embraced that sort of tell one story in multi-chapters. It's a singular vision. It's a movie across 6 or 8 parts, what have you. Whereas, again, Star Trek has the advantage of growing up in television and being able to tell individual stories that may or may not be linked thematically, emotionally, you know, plot-wise, what have you. The most popular, the most durable shows through television, you know, across generations, across decades, cop shows, you know, police procedural type shows going all the way back to Dragnet, medical shows, you know, from Emergency to ER to what have you.
House.
The Good Doctor, House. Detective shows, investigating, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's not quite cop shows, but similar. The thing is, what we've never seen in the Star Wars universe, as far as I can tell, and perhaps that's what Rangers of the New Republic could have been, but ultimately, you know, throughout other things is so far not moving forward. How about Star Wars doing what Ursa is saying and telling new stories, but doing it like basically ER in Star Wars, right? Like doing the medical show in that universe and having a whole bunch of different, you know, things, intergalactic biology, you know, the Empire's launched a devastating thing that's going to wipe out a planet and they have to get the survivors, you know, the antidote, or the detective show, you know, where Coruscant private eyes and someone got thrown off a building and, I mean, they ended up, you know, crashing into an airspeeder, and it's one part of that storytelling universe that they've never really explored, where they take a traditional television model, because again, they cancel 5 cop shows a season and Dick Wolf writes 3 more for the next season. It would be interesting, right? Because all of the shows on tap, all of the shows we've talked about, all the shows we've enjoyed, you know, even The Mandalorian, which does have its sort of, you know, monster of the week or things like that, it's still trying to tell this galactic story of a man making his way through the universe, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it would be fascinating if Star Wars successfully landed on one of those, you know, NCIS or Chicago Fire type, you know, frameworks. And then Whereas the whole point of those shows, if you think about it, it's not really about what's going on in between the episodes. It's always about the characters. It's George Clooney, it's Anthony Edwards, it's Eric de La Salle, it's Noah. I forgot what Noah's name was.
Wiley.
Noah Wiley. There you go, Mike Wiley. Like, it's character forward, right? And then you have to build over a season. You have to build the emotional connections to those characters. George Clooney's been drinking, or Anthony Edwards now his hands shake when he does surgery. Like, that would be fascinating, right? Because Star Wars has always been sort of narrative first, and perhaps Star Trek and these other shows have always emphasized character first, versus the what's going on in the specifics. And I'm not saying that that's to the detriment of Star Wars, but what I'm saying is it would be a whole new avenue to perhaps see where it's not the exact stories that they're telling that are so compelling, but these are people that I want to spend week in, week out with them. So that occurred to me. That was something that, who knows if you're listening, Kathleen Kennedy, Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, and all of the do-gooders. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, yes. So,
Ewan McGregor.
Yes, Ewan McGregor. He would be fantastic. Call us. So.
Hello there.
By the way, I love how Filoni has just taken, to me, is feeding Disney its lunch by consistently going back to extended universe material and just pulling it in at a whim. Like, this Jason kid, who obviously has force powers, is such a push at Jason Solo. That's all it is.
Well, did you catch the Heir to the Empire?
Yes.
Yes. Right in the delivery. Right. I'm like, I read that book. Like, oh my god.
Right. Yeah. And to me, I think he's singing the praises and acknowledging all the great work that had been done all the way up until the sequel trilogy came out. Right. Like, that was filling the gaps for people like us that just absolutely love Star Wars. We were able to consume all this content. Go ahead.
I think the Heir to the Empire line is very telling. We can't, obviously, for reasons, the time has passed, people have passed. We cannot do a full-on adaptation of Timothy Zahn's classic trilogy. It
would have been so good.
Yes. Yeah. That starship has launched, unfortunately. But what I think we've been set up here for, and UrzaMaster may have intimated this an episode or two ago, is, when Marvel does their Days of Futures Past or their Infinity War, they don't just go to the source comics and just transcribe what happened. They adapt it, and there will be some elements that you recognize, some that the hardcore comic book fans go, oh yeah. And then some things that are spun out of whole cloth and work in a more modern setting or what have you. I think we're going to get the basic thrust of Heir to the Empire culminating in Filoni's movie. I think we're going to basically get that storyline, only instead of telling it through Luke and Leia and Han and those eyes, we'll be telling it through Din Djarin and Ahsoka and so forth. I mean, Thrawn is you just plop him right in. But Joruus C'baoth, that could have been Balin. That could be another. So I think fans of that Timothy Zahn trilogy, just to cite that as an example, we haven't gone into the Yuuzhan Vong or all the others, but fans of Heir to the Empire can say, I recognize enough of this. I see what they're doing here. And that to me is cool. Like I say, if we can't have the straight adaptation anymore, you could do it animated, I suppose, and I think they have done it in comic book form to flush it out a bit. That to me is, that would be a lot of fun, is if they kind of brought the main ideas. Would there be a Mara Jade type, kind of a, could you, maybe she doesn't hook up with Luke, but there's some other, so I'm curious. Is Shin Hati going to turn into Mara Jade? For as long as we're...
And do you bring Mark Hamill back for that film? Because theoretically, Luke's still around. He's still there in a sense.
So this is 5 years after Jedi, which is when he's supposedly, again, at his height, as we saw in The Mandalorian. And it's still a good 15 or 20 years, maybe more, before the sequel trilogy. So, yes,
And
he's very much around. Yes.
And which was, to me, one of the complaints about the sequel trilogy is we never got to see Luke Skywalker supposed to be the most powerful Jedi that was ever around, and we never got to see it. He should have been pulling Star Destroyers out of the sky and doing all this crazy stuff, and all I got was him force projecting himself across the universe.
And then he got sleepy.
And then dies from that. Really?
Okay. Well,
So
save that for your last Jedi.
we'll have that discussion another day.
Yes.
Anyway, and they are going to pull a Marvel Avengers Assemble, and they're all going to get together to fight Thrawn. Here's my hope. I hope they don't kill Thrawn in that movie. I hope they keep him around beyond that somehow. He's just such a great villain. I hate to see him go. Who knows? Maybe he'll clone himself.
Somehow, Thrawn has returned. No, anyways.
Think about that line, by the way.
All the Thrawns.
Just think about that line.
Okay,
And
now
the
we're
way
not
he
doing this
delivers
yet.
it in
When
the
we get
movie.
to Rise of Skywalker, we'll do that. So, also, real quick
right.
hits before we go into other stuff like the Kyber crystals and the like. I love the fight with Huang because again,
Yes.
3PO doesn't get into fights, and he's not very good. I mean, he's enough to be able to keep from getting disassembled, but he's literally, as he's getting punched by the baddie, saying, "Help, help me, help!"
Yes.
Like he's an
That was
instructor.
probably the coolest fight ever.
He's
Yes.
just, and he's just like, and he's able, like I say, to deflect and maybe do a kick or two, but he's not going to last very long until they come out. I love Sabine's attempt at the Force that fails, and then it turns out it's a feint to use the Mandalorian wrist dart, which, again, she's Mandalorian. And when she comes out swinging in the first fight, when they come off the ship, she's got her armor on, she's got her blasters. I mean, she's
I
as
love that.
as a badass of a fighter, as a Mandalorian, let's say, as someone with the Jedi. I thought all of the duels were different and interesting, and there was that quiet tension with Baylan and Ahsoka as they sized each other up as like worthy opponents. It wasn't just rush forward and slash and this and that. It was like they took a long time to like size each other up and figure out where the openings would be I love the moment where he tells Shin to release her from the Force choke. Like, Shin is pissed, and she's like, and he's like, release her. And it's like the gravity again of Stevenson, and she's like, okay, like,
Enough of this.
right,
Vader, release him.
as you wish.
As you wish.
So, and I loved. Uther brought it up. I love Carson Teva and X-Wing Squadrons. Like, that's to me is a lot of fun to just
So cool.
see those guys flying about.
Rad.
So my Kyber crystals for the week. First and foremost, Hera Syndulla. She decides to not listen to the Senate and go off and rescue the team. She's flying the Ghost, which is her ship from Rebels. It's not the first time we've seen it in live action, though. It's in a blink and you miss it cameo. When the Alliance shows up over Scarif in Rogue One, ready to try and get the Death Star plans and all that, you can see the Ghost clearly, but you have to be looking for it as they come out of hyperspace and are flying there. I'm like, it's Hera's ship. Also in that same film, a few scenes prior, as they're getting ready to leave the Yavin base, you can see Chopper, Hera's droid, her astromech rolling around outside the base there. So there were a couple of Rebels cameos even before that. Anyways, on the Ghost, Hera's ship, and I did not see this at first blush. The internet had to tell me to go look for it, and then I went and looked for it, and lo and behold, the internet is always right. There is a picture of Kanan Jarrus, Hera's compatriot in Rebels, lover, and father of Jason. There is a photograph attached on the dashboard of the Ghost, and again, it's a blink and you miss it. You have to know you're looking for it to see it, but it is there. Kanan was voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. during the show. There are no plans to bring him into live action as his character perished. And in fact, that's what Ezra was trying to undo in the World Between Worlds, was save Kanan. But by saving Kanan, he would have doomed the rest of them. So ergo, he remains dead. Could he return as a Force ghost? It's entirely possible. And Ahsoka's wounded hand. a brief moment there before she goes cliffside. A shout out to Raiders of the Lost Ark and Tote. And the speculation being that although Balin destroyed the map and says we will not be followed, that the star map has been imprinted on Ahsoka's hand, and that might be the device that they use to figure out where to go and all of that. One quick final fan theory before I turn it back over to Ursa. There's another thing that the World Between Worlds can do, although having the Eye of Sion make the jump to hyperspace and take out the X-Wings while they were doing it, that might undercut it a little. I thought, knowing what I knew about the World Between Worlds, how we were going to get Ezra and Thrawn back from their fate in Rebels, where they were carried off into hyperspace by those space whales, the Purrgil. I thought that they would find that moment, that they would restage that moment in live action, and that's just literally taking them from that moment and bringing them into our... Now, is that still possible? I don't know, but that was how I thought they would avoid, like, well, what has Ezra and Thrawn been up to the last 5 years, is just to go back to that moment before they are whisked away.
Oh, okay.
And bring them into the contemporary universe that we are known. Again, that was wild speculation on my part. I'd say it's 90-10 that won't happen now that they've made that jump. But it will be interesting to see how they've explained to people who were at each other's throats, quite literally, when they left the galaxy, what they've been up to for 5 years or longer outside of the galaxy. So that's there. I'm like UrzaMaster, if he had gotten hemophilia. I'm a gusher on this one, and you'll know shortly what that all means there. But I just sat there enraptured for 41 minutes last night, and just I couldn't turn it off. I'd had a rough Tuesday. My baseball team's going into the tank, and I needed a pick-me-up, and by God, Fallen Jedi, despite its dark tones, lifted my spirits, so I was beaming. I was glowing like a Force ghost.
Ooh, I like that. I mean, I think they're at a really interesting point. They can segue into a lot of different things. I think my big fear is it's going to be a wasted opportunity. And I say that because Star Wars has a history of wasting opportunities. And we don't need to rehash every single one of them, but what I've seen from Filoni so far, he's earned the title. I am giving him now Felonious Monk.
Nice.
It's definitely working out pretty well. I do think it would be interesting, and I'm one to make predictions, as you all know, as the fans are well aware of here on Pending Rebrand and with the Graying Jedi and other productions. I would really, really enjoy seeing a Thrawn and what's his name? Buzz? Ezra.
Ezra Bridger.
I'm going to make this an ongoing joke, by the way. I know his name is Ezra Bridger. But I would really like to see a Thrawn and an Ezra Bridger, I'd love to see that flashback moment where they're getting carried off by these, whales. Only to find themselves now marooned on a planet with even more formidable foes, where they have to become the unlikely tag team to keep themselves alive for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And they've had to somehow set aside their deep, deep divisions, thinking, we're stuck here. We're under constant attack from, whatever the entekment creatures are, or the whatchamacallit, I don't know the name. It's escaping me right now.
Usain Vaughn?
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
Yes.
The Sarlacc.
Or something new. Something entirely new that is not drawn out of, extended universe canon. Maybe it's a hybrid Gorn Force user or something. I don't know. I mean, I think there's really strong potential to introduce a new big bad that your current big bad and your current big good have had to literally set aside their bloodthirst for each other to survive for 5 years. And now that they have a path out, one is like, oh, we can finally go home. We can put our differences aside and use what we've learned here to gray the Jedi, to bring, things back to a normal where good and evil can, resolve their differences through whatever diplomacy they've discovered. And Thrawn, of course, having the dark undertone of F that, I'm going to take back the Empire and squash the beef my own way. And then, of course, they come back and you have your big explosion. The problem is their presence in this new galaxy has now tripped every species within that galaxy of how to get out. They're now being tracked back.
Wow.
In some form or variety. And maybe it only introduces one small bad that complicates the big, crux of whatever new crisis arrives. But after that crisis is abated and they get to your first orders and your sequel series, and then Rey's like, well, I'm on Tatooine and sand sure is getting everywhere. Holy shit, what's that coming out of the sky? It's the Independence Day aliens. Right. And now all of a sudden a new big bad has come, and there's this Jedi that has to reestablish a Jedi Order because the galaxy's being taken over by, Sith Gorn, led by, I don't know, these coven of witches that escaped their planet long ago and rode the whales, or who knows, maybe it's just evil whales. I don't know. I mean, what's that song from Saturday Night Live? Rainforests are the devil. We've got to kill the devil. Who knows what they could do? You never know what Phoebe's going to say. So I just think they have a real opportunity here to not just seize the moment for what Star Wars is, but develop something new and organic, which would be compelling and interesting. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do anything of what I just said because it's way easier to make money by not reinventing the wheel. So with that.
Oh, wait, I just want to ask one more question, just real quick.
Go ahead.
Where does Ahsoka rank on your list of Jedi? Is she one of the most powerful? Is she average? Is she below average? I mean, we're ranking Sabine, at least
right.
the robot did, right? Like, you're not even...
Right,
you can barely even walk forward. I mean, so where does Ahsoka... Because I'm getting all this Ahsoka love, like she's one of the greatest things ever.
No.
So what do you think?
I actually think the thing that's most embraceable about her, and that's before we learned that Sabine was basically us. We can't even move a cup. Ahsoka was never on the level of Anakin, or even perhaps Obi-Wan. I mean, as they fought along the Clone Wars, she was an adept, capable Force user. I think her journey has to be traced by how she first appeared to us versus where she is now. And we said that before. She starts off as a bratty 14-year-old, and now she's Qui-Gon Jinn, basically, with a stoic approach and a much more mature thing there. So no, I don't think she's one of the greatest Jedi who ever walked the halls like Yoda or Count Dooku or any of those. But I embrace her as kind of just being someone who embodies what the ideals of the Force are and are not hemmed in by the sacred Jedi texts, right? She is a free thinker. She walked away from the Order. She embraces the humanistic side of the Force. And like I say, she doesn't need Sabine to be a great Jedi. She needs her to be a great Sabine. So that's why I like about her. But no, Anakin, Obi-Wan, they're far more powerful Jedis, Sidious, and Sith out there. I'd put her in the very middle 50 percentile in terms of ability. But I think what's ticking up here and so forth, I think is made her extraordinary.
Urza.
I kind of have to agree with that assessment in a way. I think she is sort of the rank and file of the Jedi Order. Her claim to fame is that her master was Anakin, and she sort of understood the Anakin side that drove him to become Vader, but was able to adapt that side to remain on the light side of the Force, and kind of ushers in the idea of a gray Jedi. So like, yeah, in terms of like raw power or whatever, however you want to rank her, like I mean, you know, middling for sure. I think in terms of influence, she's probably upper middling, because she's got some scope of influence. But you know, I still think that there's tremendous potential for a Sabine Wren to be a powerful Mandalorian Jedi, and just maybe a Jedi in a different form than a Luke Skywalker or a Kylo Ren or a Rey Palpatine.
Ray Skywalker, but
It's tough, right? It's tough because I think the best epic stories are told with your biggest force users, your biggest powers. But I think your most compelling stories are your rank and files. I think your everyday, you know, because it's more identifiable. Like, I don't identify with Luke Skywalker. I'm fascinated by his story. It's kind of like me watching the Michael Jordan documentary. This is the only time in my life I've ever been like kind of into basketball was when Michael Jordan was playing, because he's the greatest of all time, and you don't see greatness and go, holy this is boring as H. You know, you see greatness and you go, I don't care if I don't like this, I'm going to watch it. It's like a Super Bowl featuring Tom Brady. I don't like the Patriots, but I'm going to watch it.
Right.
good call.
You know, and that's those are the stories that are just they're always fun. You know, there's never been, I mean, you know, but those big moments aren't always staffed by those big names that are universe altering, like a Skywalker. I mean, occasionally you get a Rex Grossman. So if you haven't, check out Cut the Cheese, Poke the Bear. But you know, I think what's cool about what Star Wars is doing is they are featuring stories with people who have spheres of influence, but aren't necessarily moving the canon along. I do think there's potential with future stories that come out of this Ahsoka sphere of influence or the Mandalorian sphere of influence, like a future Grogu story maybe, that could have significant impact and create those big, epic, silver screen type stories for the future. And that's where I think a Grand Admiral Thrawn would be interesting to see. You know, a Grogu-led team, and that's how the Jedi Order under Rey finally gets established, is that they bring down the new Empire, which would be incredible. I mean, honestly, I'd sign up to watch that movie. Even though it would be A New Hope reimagined, it could be told in a very different way that makes it more compelling and entertaining. You know, it needn't be a direct repeat. Although I think if we're just talking about who the chosen one is, which is a hot topic on the internet these days, and as I've said before, there is only one answer to that question. And if you answer it any other way, you're just simply wrong. The chosen one is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Always has been, always will be. And if you don't understand why, go back to the episode where I explained it. I'm not going to rehash it here. You're wrong. I am right. Just like that one advisor in Armageddon. Now, that all being said, it is time to rate this fourth episode of Ahsoka Tano. Damn it, I was so close.
So close.
Out of our lightsaber colors, and I haven't started yet, so I'm going to offer up my lightsaber. Now, just to remind our millions
And millions.
of viewers, our rankings start at a red lightsaber, which is, of course, the saber of the Sith, which means it was unsuccessful in entertaining in many ways, or in all ways. Upgraded from that, of course, we have the blue lightsaber, which is an achievement lifesaber. Lifesaber? Must have went from candy. Lightsaber. That's your middle of the road. Good, not great. Green lightsaber. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of lightsaber that stands up to Darth Vader and the Emperor and somehow convinces one of them to take out the other without having to do anything. That's amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a green lightsaber. And my reason for that, even though I have a couple minor issues, I think it earned it because The fight scenes in this, whether it's between robots, between Jedi, or the henchmen, shall we say, or the ship battle that never was, incredibly well executed. And like Jedi Master Psyllium Maas mentioned, they're all different. They all feel different. I still think there's a tension, a growing tension, romantically speaking, between our two apprentices. And I'm sticking with that would make a very entertaining way of driving those characters forward towards a gray path, which would be gray path, gay path, however you want to put it. I think it would be pretty amazing. One, because I think it's overdue that Star Wars in a live action takes that plunge and represents enlightened relationships. But I also think that you have a Dark Force user and a Light Force user, and combining those two in an unlikely romantic relationship ushers in a whole new era, which would, by the way, play right in to my Ezra Bridger / Grand Admiral Thrawn unification against the pseudo Klingon lizard men of Babylon 5 or whatever planet they're on. I forget the name of it. And I just think it'd be great stuff. But again, these fights are great. That fight between Ahsoka and Ray Stevenson's character, I don't remember his name. Balin. That was incredible. That acting in that sequence was just inspiringly great. The two played it off the way I always wanted to see Vader and Obi-Wan. And we got a great fight between those two on Kenobi, but that staunch, sort of aged, we're both masters now. We both know we're both very capable. We both know we have different agendas. It doesn't need to be a fight. We could probably resolve this another way, but we both know we have to do this. And that, think of it like a great wrestling match. A great wrestling match tells a story without having to tell you a story. You know that these two have history. You know that these two know each other. You know that these two have connections that run a lot deeper than I'm a bad guy, you're a good guy. I mean, that right there almost sold it for me. Everything else is icing on the cake.
I'll go next. You guys aren't gonna like this, but too bad. I'm going blue.
Okay.
And here's why. I have a couple issues. I'm getting a lot of Batman-itis with Anakin. Everyone and their brother now somehow knows that Anakin was Darth Vader, and that's really bothering me, because it's running along the lines of there's no Jedi left, and every time you land on a new planet, there's a Jedi there or someone that's Force sensitive. So I'm struggling with that because, and I'm sorry, but a lot of this goes back to the original series here, or the original movies, where I felt like some of that canon was established and we've wandered away from it. That's just my thought there. My other slight issue with the episode was Balin should have just taken that map right out of Sabine's hand.
Way too long.
Yeah, right. There's no other reason for him to have stood there and just been like, give it to me. Unless he was trying to get, I know where you're probably going to go with this, because I was thinking the same thing. I want her to join us, not be against us. I kind of get it. Then just take the map out of her hand and force her to go along, do whatever you got. I don't know. That threw me off a little bit as well. And though I probably shouldn't be, because you've convinced me otherwise, I'm slightly nervous that they're going to retcon something. And even though I can't stand the sequel trilogy, especially 8 and 9 the most, I'm just hoping I'm not tempting fate too much. So,
okay, a quick pushback on your last point before I do the thing. So, I think what's insidious
did I use?
About
Fate.
Balin.
Fate. Temple Fate.
I think what's insidious about it is, and I disagree with both your points on with both of you guys
Good.
taking it too long. He wants, for him, the corruption is the process, right? So he convinces Sabine to do what she really wants to do all along. Like, she wants to go get Ezra. She wants to disregard everything that Ahsoka was trying to tell her. That's what her heart is telling her, like the pure, non-logical, front brain type of stuff there. Like, she does not want to pull that trigger. And so he basically corrupts her in that moment by just getting her to, agree with everything that he says in a very calm voice. Do it for Ezra, do it for, and gets her to, it's in fact commit that act of betrayal, which is much worse than slicing off her hand like in Cloud City, and slicing off your son's hand or whatever. So
Not from a Jedi.
I love the moment in the fact that he got a character that I've got a special connection with, and a lot of fans from Rebels do, to make her do something that we just think is unthinkable. Like, Sabine, how could you do that? Like, nothing that you have seen Sabine up until this moment would make you think that she would actually bend the knee. And he gets her to do it, which A, shows how powerful he is, and B, for me, puts a lot of emotional stakes as to how she's going to fix it. And I hope Ursa's right that this is all some part of, like, she's got a plan going and she just is, or she's winging it and is going to figure out a plan. So my grade for Fallen Jedi is Kelly Green, which is one of the brightest greens that you can find outside of a billiards table. So I'm going Kelly Green. I just thought the entire episode, we talked about it the week before where we were moving pieces around to get to this. This was a payoff, which is now we're going to get a double payoff when we see next week in the World Between Worlds and what they've got cooking up for that. But here was a thing where we were telling character through action, and we were delivering a gut punch to the audience midway through a show where we say, okay, so now we're going to pull the rug out from you, and whatever we do from this point on, just hang on and put your seatbelts on and we'll try to see there. So it's my fervent hope that it will live up to that promise, that new hope that you guys are harboring, because I want you to walk out with silly grins, right? I want you to remember how you felt when you saw A New Hope or The Empire Strikes Back or Jedi or what have you. Pick your favorite Star Wars moment. When Luke Skywalker appeared at the end of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, I was ravaged with COVID-19 at that, and I think it cured me, literally, when I saw that entire sequence. From that point on, I didn't care if I lived, died, or whatever. I was floating for a week on that revelation. So I hope that sometime in the next 4 episodes, or in all of the next 4 episodes, that Dave Filoni and team give you guys that warm, fuzzy feeling that only great storytelling and great Star Wars storytelling can give you. So
I can't help myself. One of the reasons why you felt like that during The Mandalorian, because you finally got the Luke Skywalker that you wanted and we all deserved.
there you go.
Agreed.
We're all in consensus for once. Lord Uther approved.
Ba-ba-ba. One thing I would love to see, just as a closing thought on this episode, as we look forward to the World Between Worlds in the next episode, I would love to see them somehow tie in a pod race. With that, this is the Graying Jedi. I am UrzaMaster. That's Lord Uther. Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. We thank you for joining us on this long journey in discovery of the Force that binds us, penetrates us, oh my, and eventually will give us some kind of a payoff in the Star Wars universe through one adaptation or another. Thank you as always, and may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.